Well, greetings, everybody. Welcome once again to the RecPoker Podcast, officially sponsored by Running Aces Casino and Racetrack. I'm your host, Steve Fredland, and today is a summary, again, of all that I've done so far with pre-flop ranges. But today I'm going to try to clarify some things. I've been working on this quite a bit, trying to make it easier around the terminology and around the implementation. And I'm still accepting feedback, so I don't consider this final, but hopefully it continues to clarify where I'm going with this. And I am continuing to get feedback. I've gotten a fair amount so far, so there could be some changes forthcoming, but this today is really about continuing to streamline, continuing to clarify what this pre-flop range process could look like. And I found it pretty interesting. As you know, the podcast has grown in numbers significantly over the past, especially the past year or so. But the last few episodes, our numbers have actually gone down the past few episodes, but our engagement as far as emails, personal phone calls, direct messages through Facebook and Twitter, all of those have increased significantly over the past few weeks. So I found that pretty interesting, and I think that's a good thing for what I'm trying to do. My primary goal here is really to help us recreational players grow our game. So frankly, I'm much more interested in the engagement than I am about the listenership. I mean, all of us podcasters, everybody seems to have a fair share of desire to be famous and that sort of thing. That's really not my goal. My goal is to grow our game. So the fact that our engagement is increasing, I take that as a far more important sign than our numbers dropping a little bit. So my point there is really, I'm glad that this is helping so many of you. And I guess the categories of people I would say are those of you who this is providing some sort of a structure that you've started to use, you've started to implement. You're maybe putting your own tweaks on it, and that's great. But that's part of it. For the other part of the engagement I've seen, it's people that have been inspired or encouraged to develop your own intentional ranges. So it might not be that my ranges are resonating with you as much as it is providing you the impetus and the motivation to develop your own ranges. And frankly, both of those are awesome results, because I'm not claiming that my strategy is going to be the best, but if it can be a starting point for some of you and a launching point for others of you, I have succeeded in what my goal is with this whole series of pre-flop ranges, these episodes. So my plan is to summarize this week, continue to take all of the input. If you want to provide input, please do so by November 6th. And then I'm going to provide a final episode on my pre-flop ranges for the early stage of a tournament, unless there's really no change. If this is really it, if there's no changes, I might not do another episode. I don't want to waste your time or my time. But then if that is the case where I do sort of release a final one, then I'll announce where we're going to go from there. So another thing to point out with this, I'm also planning to, once I have this all finalized, create an article for a new blog that I'm starting, which will go on RecPokerTraining.com. So watch for that. It'll be all written out, which I know many of you have requested already. And speaking of the website, if you haven't signed up yet for the email newsletter, you can do so there, and you can get a free download of a 115-page workbook from Jonathan Little. And while you're there, you can also check out Patreon to support the podcast, support what I'm doing. The more support, the more things that we can provide. So go to patreon.com/RecPoker. And you can, depending on your support level, you can get some great additional training, support, discounts, that sort of thing. And I do want to thank our new Patreon subscribers, Jerry Kniff at the silver level and Peter Whitman at the bronze level. So thanks to Jerry, thanks to Peter. I appreciate your support, and I trust that you're going to get a lot of value out of those support levels. Also, those of you wearing patches that I know of that I saw, Derek Smith, Taylor Moss, Steve Olson, who had one in a winner's photo, so way to go, Steve-O. Brian Morey, and I know Jerry Kniff is taking some of those on a road trip for playing poker. So thanks, you guys, and all of you others out there who I wasn't able to mention. Also, Facebook Live, I've started doing a little bit about that. So if you are a part of the RecPoker group on Facebook, I've started doing a little 2-3 minute videos on Facebook Live when I start to go into a tournament during breaks, and then at the end sort of reflecting on how things went. Had some good feedback on that, so I'll continue to do that. And I've also started doing a little bit more with video. I plan on sort of expanding that. So there is a YouTube channel for RecPoker Training, so find that. There's a link. I think there's a link out on the RecPoker training site as well. So subscribe there. I promise not to clutter that with a bunch of useless stuff, but I think there's going to be some valuable things that'll go out there as well. And finally, a quick reminder, live seminars, November 10th in Lino Lakes. There's still room. I'm having one from 8 to 11 and also from noon to 3, November 10th, Lino Lakes, Minnesota. And then also we're going to be doing an online player panel. I've got four great recreational players from the state of Minnesota who are going to be there for really just open-ended Q&A discussion. This is going to be November 29th from 7 to 9 p.m. I'm going to charge just $10 for that. Unless you are a Patreon subscriber at least the silver level, you'll get that free. But $10 to join them online for a 2-hour discussion. And I've got to figure out the details for registrations and that, so just stay tuned, but you could save the date. I'll be collecting questions beforehand, and then during, if we have time, we'll open that up for those of you who are online. And that's going to include Matt Hamilton, Max Havlish, Ian Matakis, and Alan Carty. And for those of you who are from Minnesota, you'll know those names and know the respect that those folks have. So stay tuned for details on that. Okay, so last week we went through everything in detail. And again, this week is sort of cleanup on where I'm going to try to clarify the process, clarify the language, and streamline the implementation. So I've been thinking about this quite a bit, and I've got some new twists on how to approach this. So obviously you can implement this however it works for you, but this is more and more how I'm leaning to try to reduce mental energy and make it as easy as possible. So here goes. The process basically is... before the hand is dealt, identify your base range. And I'm starting to refer to this as your base action range. And I used to label these ranges 22, 33. Pardon me. I used to label these ranges 22, 33 up to 99, but for simplicity, I'm going to start using just base action range 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9. So if you are on the button, your base action range is 2. In the cutoff, your base action range is 3. And all the way up until, if you were to be under the gun 10-handed, you would end up being at base action range 9. But this base action range really just forms the foundation of this 3-digit action range. And this sounds complicated, but I don't think it's going to be at all. Obviously, any sort of range memorization and that sort of thing requires some work, but I think this is fairly straightforward. What this is leading to is understanding a 3-digit base action range. And the first number to start with is going to be that base action range number that we already figured out. So all of this has nothing to do with the value of your hand. This is just the representing the ranges that define what your action should be in certain situations. And the situations that we have broken this down into is if there's no action in front of you, if there's at least one limp in front of you, or if there's a single raise in front of you. And the process is pretty simple, but it does take a little practice, and it's consistent with what we've done before. So what we really want is we want this 3-digit action range for each of those 3 potential situations. So your 3-digit action range when there's no action in front of you is very simple. It's just the base action range repeated. So for example, if you're in the hijack, which is 2 places off of the button, your base action range is 4, which makes your 3-digit action range 444. Now you can just think of this as a 4, but I think later on you'll see why it's probably easier to have this 3-digit code because it's going to be consistent with how you think about your other action ranges. Now, you can start to determine your 3-digit action range pretty easily in the case that there are just limpers in front of you. If there's one limper or more in front of you, you can determine your 3-digit action range simply by starting with your base action range. Remember, it was 4 in this case. Then add 2, and then add 3 more. So plus 2 and then plus 3 more will get you to your 3-digit action range in this position. So in the hijack, remember your base action range is 4, so your no action range is 444. And if there's a limp in front of you, your action range changes to 469. Okay, we added 2, then we added 3. So 469. And note that 9 will always be the maximum. So if we add 2 and we add 3 and it's more than 9, just use a 9 in all cases. And so finally, and we'll go through some examples at the end of this. So I know this is drinking from a fire hose, but I really like this process, and I think you'll see why as we get further into this. But the third situation is where there's a range in front of you. And here, we're going to start with the base range, but that base range is actually going to change, and we're going to play it as if we were 3 positions earlier. Okay, so if there's a raise in front of you, we're going to play it like we're 3 positions earlier. So that's going to become the first digit of the code is 3 positions higher. Okay, then the second digit of that code is going to be adding 1 more, and then the final digit is always a 9. So in this case where we are in the hijack, where our base range is a 4, our 3-digit code now switches to 7, 8, 9. We added 3 to the first digit, added 1 more, and then we always end in 9. So from the hijack, our 3 ranges are 4, 4, 4, 4, 6, 9, or 7, 8, 9. Now, I don't subscribe to trying to memorize, hijack 4, 4, 4, 4, 6, 9, 7, 8, 9. I just like to follow this concept of the 4 always, 4, 4, 4, and then we add 2 and 3 to get to 4, 6, 9, and we add 3 and then 1 more and then a 9 at the end. So it sounds complicated. I do think you'll get it as we practice more and more. And remember, for any specific hand, you don't have to know all of these things, because the action is what is going to dictate which code you need. And also, you don't need to memorize all the ranges and all of these things, because you're only going to be in one position for any given hand, and you're only going to have one course of action in front of you for any given hand. So as long as you sort of remember the structure, this is going to get there. Right now, I'm giving you all of the examples, which makes it seem incredibly convoluted. So just try to remember those principles, and we'll go through some exercises later, and you'll see why for any given hand, it's really not that much mental energy. Okay. So these 3 codes for any given position, we talked about the hijack being the 4, 4, 4, and then if there's a limp, it becomes 4, 6, 9, and then if there's a raise, it becomes 7, 8, 9. I'm starting to refer to these as our open action range, our limp action range, and our raise action range. Okay, so for each of those situations. And I am going to create some flashcards, quizzes, and other tools once all of this gets locked in, and including a chart of sort of what are all of these by each position. But that's the general approach. So for me, the base range is easy. It's position only, and then I like to use the +2, +3 for the limp action range, and then +3 or +1 for the raise action range. For some, it might be best to lock all 3 of these ranges in before you look at your hand, because there may be comfort in knowing what these are if and when the action changes, so you've already thought about what your response is based on your hand. And I think that's good practice. And once you are well versed in this, I would expect this to take somewhere between 5 and 15 seconds per hand, depending on how good you are at this. So if you're going to do things this way, you look down, you realize you're at the button. And so you realize that, I'm 3 off of the button, so I'm in base range 5. And then I could quickly think, okay, if there's no action in front of me, I'm in range 5, 5, 5, which basically means I'm going to raise if my hand is within range 5. If there's limps, I'm at a 5, 7, 9 situation. And if there's a raise, I'm at an 8, 9, 9 situation. So I could do all of that before I look at my hand, and then I know what the action is in front of me. And again, because there's only going to be one set of actions in front of me, I only am going to need to work with one of those. And if there's no action, I can just think, I can just, if my hand's in the range 5, I can raise. If there's just limping in front of me, I think, I'm at 5, 7, 9. If there's a raise, I can think I'm at 8, 9, 9. Now, here's how we use these codes, this 5, 7, 9 or 8, 9, 9, for example. This 3-digit action range is all about taking the range that you're going to play and splitting it up so that you have a polarized raising range. So in practice, you would consider your hand range, where your hand actually is in terms of rank, and we'll discuss that in a second, versus your action range. So if your hand range is at least as big as the last number in that action range, you're going to raise. If it's not, but at least as big as the second number, then you should call. If not, but at least as big as the first number, then you should raise. And so we'll go over some of the examples at the end about this. But basically, if your 3-digit action code is 579, this means if your hand is a range 9, you're going to raise. If it's 7 or 8, you're going to call. If it's 5 or 6, you're going to raise. And anything below a 5, you're just going to fold. So that's how the action range starts to get used. Okay? So that's your 3-digit action code, and we'll bring that all together at the end. Now let's talk about your hand range, or basically what is the maximum range that your hand lies in. And I've shared this method of determining before, where you start with the ranges and then ask where the hand fits. This week I want to take another look at how you could determine this. Either way is accurate, and you can determine which way you prefer, but I think this way may be a bit easier for some of us. And basically it just says, okay, if I'm going to look down at my hand, if my hand is a pair, that rank is the hand range, up to a maximum of 9. So this seems pretty easy. If I look down and I pick up pocket 7s, I'm in hand range 7. If I pick up pocket queens, I'm in hand range 9. If I pick up pocket 3s, I'm in hand range 3. So pairs are super easy. If my hand contains suited cards, okay, I've got 2 suited cards, I take the lowest card and I subtract 3 from it. And that is my hand range. Now, if that result is lower than a hand range 2, it's a fold, with the only current exception being that if I have a suited ace, it must be in at least hand range 3. So if I have a suited ace, I'll do the regular thing, take the smallest one, subtract 3, and see what the hand range is. Well, if that's anything lower than 3, I'm going to adjust that to say all suited aces have to be at least hand range 3. So consider these examples. I have 10-5 suited. I look at the 5s, take off 3, I'm in range 2. If I have Queen-Jack suited, that's in hand range 8. Yep, Jack, 10-9, 8. Okay, take off 3. If I have Ace-7 suited, what hand range is that in? It's in hand range 4. If I have Ace-3 suited, that's in hand range 3 because I used the exception there. If I have Queen-8 suited, that's in hand range 5. Right, okay. So finally, the most common situation is if I have 2 unpaired, unsuited cards. And the easiest thing for me to do here is know that we have this rule that says they have to both be at least a 10 or it's not really a playable hand using our default strategy. So I can just quickly look, and if I have 2 unsuited, unpaired cards, which is the most common hand to have, if they're not both at least a 10, it's just a fold. It falls below the hand range 2, so it's just a fold. And that's going to be the majority of the situation. But if both cards are at least a 10, then the hand range is the lowest card subtracting 4. Remember that we want to have one range worse than our suited counterparts. So unplayable hands using this methodology include unsuited 9-8, Queen-7, Ace-9, Ace-3, King-8, 6-5, etc. As far as playable hands, where will Jack-10 offsuit be? Well, we look at the 10, we take off 4, so that's range 6. King-Queen is in range 8. We start with the Queen, then we go Jack, 10, 9, 8. Ace-King is in range 9. Ace-Jack is in range 7. So now at this point, we have our hand range. We know what range our hand is in, and we have our base action range. And for some of us, we know our full action range. We've already figured out what is our 3-digit code for an open action range, a limp action range, and a raise action range. But at least we have our base action range. So if we follow this system and our hand range is below our base action range, we are going to fold. Now that doesn't mean we're not going to keep paying attention to the hand, but this is going to be the most common situation. And I think this is the least mental energy is if you just say, okay, I'm in this position, so the base action range is a 5. Then I can look at my hand. I don't have to wait for it to get to me. There's no rule that says that. I can look at my hand and say, oh, my hand is a hand range 4. I'm just going to fold. I don't need to expend any extra energy unless I just want to work on practicing some of these things. But I can just fold and not have to worry about that. Or for the other side would be if my hand is in range 9, I know I'm always going to raise. So I don't have to expend all of that extra effort as well there. But in some of those cases, we know our base range is, say, like a 5, our base action range, and our hand range is a 7. Now it's going to change a little bit when it gets to us. So when it does get to us, we're aware now of the action in front of us and what range we should be considering. If our hand range is below the applicable action range, we just fold. But if it meets the criteria, then we need to take that appropriate action. And to do this, we compare our hand range with that top end of the action range, the last digit. And if it's at least that high, we raise. And if not, we compare it to the middle digit. If it's at least that high, we call. And finally, if it's at least as high as the first digit, we raise. So that's where the work would have to come in if there's some action in front of us and our hand range is higher than the base action range. So that's where the work would need to come in. So let's work through a couple of examples. I know this isn't the best, easiest explanation. I wish I had more time to really make this as easy as possible. But as you know, we're on this journey together. And so the language, the process, the clarity will come over time, especially as we all kind of wrestle with this now. But for now, let's work through a couple of examples on how this could work. And I am going to take the approach that I think involves the least mental energy, but is still true to the system, which means I'm going to think about all 3 action ranges right away. I'm sorry, that I'm not going to think about all 3 action ranges right away. I'm just going to acknowledge the base range, then look at my hand. And at this point, I know that I'm going to be folding probably about 80% of the time on average, so I don't need to expend any more mental energy, even though the exercise is good. And then for the remaining 20%, I'm going to start applying the rules as I need to. So let's look at just a few of these situations. So situation 1, I'm on the button. So, and I'm going to involve you. I'm going to pause here a little bit and let you guys figure out if you got a handle on this at all. But if I'm on the button, what is my base action range? Right, it's 2, or 2-2-2 if you'd rather think about it that way. Okay, so my base action range is 2. Now I look at my hand and I find that I have King 8 offsuit. What is my hand range? Okay, this is outside of any hand range. Remember, for offsuit cards, they both need to be 10 or higher. So I'm just going to fold here, even though I'm on the button, even if there's no action in front of me, early in the tournament. Remember, we're talking about early in the tournament, phase 1. I'm just going to fold here, my King 8. So I don't really need to spend any more mental energy. I've looked at my hand. Now I can sort of study the other players, figure out what ranges they're playing, blah, blah, blah. But at the end of the day, I know I'm going to be folding. All right, situation 2. I'm in the hijack, which is 2 people away from the button. What is my base action range? Okay, it's 4. I start with the button is 2, then move away 2 more people. So 2, 3, 4. So my base action range is 4. Now I look down on my hand and I find I have King Jack suited. What is my hand range? Okay, I'm in hand range 8. Because they're suited, I'm going to use the lowest card and subtract 3 from that. So starting with the Jack, King Jack suited, start with the Jack, 10, 9, 8. So I'm in hand range 8. So right now I know that my hand range is higher than my base action range. So I'm probably going to get involved in this hand. I just need to figure out what my action is. Okay, so now it comes to me and I know there's a limp in front of me. All right, somebody limped. What is my action here with King Jack suited? Okay, so this is the biggest, most robust part of the strategy, is figuring this out. There's a limp in front of me. What is my limping action range? Okay, well, if you recall, the limping action range is that 3-digit code, and it starts with my base action range, which was 4. And for limping, I add 2 and then add 3. So my 3-digit code becomes 4, 6, 9. So my limping action range in this situation is 4, 6, 9. So what is my action? Well, remember that my hand range was 8. So I compare my hand range of 8 to this limping action range of 4, 6, 9. And what I've decided is that it's not high enough to raise from the top end. It has to be a 9 there, but it is high enough to call behind. It had to be at least a 6. So I'm going to limp behind here with King Jack suited early in a tournament. All right, hopefully we're following this. And I know it's easier when it's all written down. Situation 3. Here I'm in the low jack, which is 3 people away from the button. So what is my base action range? It's 5. So start with the button 2, 3, 4, 5. So my base action range is 5. And I look at my hand and I find pocket 6s. All right, so what is my hand range? Well, the hand range here is 6. With the pairs, that's the easiest one. It's just equal to the same number as the rank of the pair. So I'm in hand range 6 with the base action range of 5. In this case, I know I'm going to get involved unless there's a raise in front of me. I mean, that's one of the things I might be thinking about is I know if there's a raise in front of me, I'm going to increase my base action range by 3. So in this case, if there's no action in front of me or if there's a limp in front of me, I'm going to get involved. Otherwise, if there's a raise, I'm probably just going to fold this early in a tournament. Maybe, probably, according to the strategy. Okay, but in this case, my hand range is 6, my base action range is 5, and there are 2 limpers in front of me. So what is my action here? Well, let's develop that limping action range again, that 3-digit code. My base action range was 5, then I add 2 and add 3. So the limping action range becomes 5, 7, 9. And my hand range of 6 does not meet the criteria for the top raising range, which was 9, or the call behind range, which is 7, but it's big enough to be part of the bottom raising range, which is 5. So here, I would raise over the 2 limpers with a plan to fold to a big re-raise. And my bet size would probably be about 4.5 times the big blind. I tend to do 2.5 plus 1 for each limper. So in this case with pocket 6s, even though I'd probably fold to a raise, I'm going to raise to limpers. Sort of an interesting spot, but I think the logic works out for me early in a tournament based on how I like to play in this, what I call the preservation phase, which I stole from Matt Hunt of the Solve for Why Academy. Okay, one more situation, and then we're going to close up today. Situation 4, here I'm on the button, and what is my base range? It's 2, and I look down at Ace-Jack suited. So what is my hand range here with Ace-Jack suited? Well, suited cards, I subtract 3 off the jack, so I'm at hand range 8. And now in this case, there's a raise in front of me, so what is my action? I'm on the button, base range 2, I have Ace-Jack suited, hand range 8, and there's a raise in front of me. Well, with that raise, my base range increases by 3, and the full raise action range starts with that adjusted range, then adds 1, then ends in 9. So my raise action range, that 3-digit code, becomes 5, 6, 9 on the button with a raise in front of me. Increase the 2 by 3, add 1, end in 9. 5, 6, 9. So here, if I look at the 5, 6, 9, what do I do with a hand that's in range 8? Well, this isn't a call behind spot because it's not a 9, so I'm not going to raise with it, but it is a 6 or higher, so I'm going to call behind. So note here that with a 5, 6, 9 raise action range, if I had Ace-King or Ace-Queen suited, I would have raised. And I also would have raised with Ace-8 suited. But I'm going to call behind here with Ace-Jack, Ace-10, and Ace-9 suited. That is how the polarized raising range works. So that is it for today. I'm still gathering feedback to kind of bring this all together to help make this better, and feel free to submit any feedback you have. I love even very negative feedback. It's super helpful. Remember, I'm being as transparent as I can. I'm on this journey. I'm trying to figure out how to become a better player. You all know I'm not a world-class player, but I'm trying to get better, and the way that I get there is to put myself out there. Here's what I'm thinking. Get your feedback, incorporate that feedback, and hopefully become a better player. So any feedback you give helps me, helps you, helps all of RecPoker Nation get better. So it's very, very much appreciated. So again, I'm going to take all of this, come up with sort of a finalized view of where I am, create that into an article or a blog post or something. Maybe I'll create a video out of it as well, and put that out on YouTube where I can show some of these things graphically while I'm talking. I think that would be a good idea as well. So we'll decide. Next week, I'll see if I need to revisit this again or if we're good to go, and then we'll figure out where to go from that. Maybe start another round of interviews or share some other stuff that I'm learning from our great content providers, or maybe talk a little bit about playing out of the blinds early in tournaments, or as we start moving forward in tournaments. So we'll see. A long ways to go, of course, but this is a start. This is a situation that we face all the time, and so I think it's the most important one to spend a lot of time on. Okay, so that is the end of the content. I'm going to spend a little bit of time going through some of the other training things that we have, so check out there. If you don't want to hear the rest of this, I'll try to move through the rest of this pretty quickly and focus on new things for those of you who do want to listen. So the first thing to note here is if you have a group of people that want to learn together, I'm happy to work something out as far as a private seminar or discussion or book study or whatever. I can even share some of the stuff from our content providers like Solve for Why, like Splitsuit, like Alex Fitzgerald, some of the other emerging things that we have going on with partnerships with Jonathan Little. So let me know. We can work those things out, and I'll make those as affordable as possible. Reminder that we do have live in-person seminars. I'm getting some people registered for those. I think they're going to be great discussions based on the people that are going to be there. They're both going to be held on November 10th. One at 8 o'clock, one at noon. They'll both be 3 hours long. I'm going to call this Approaching a Tournament. How do we approach a tournament? And it's going to be featuring about a 40-minute video from the Solve for Why Academy called The Anatomy of an MTT, or a multi-table tournament. Fantastic video by Matt Hunt. We'll also look at some information from Alex Assassinato Fitzgerald, one of the world's greatest poker coaches. And we'll also do a little bit of watching of Poker Out Loud, this cool concept from the Solve for Why Academy. So we'll watch some of that as well. I'm limiting this to 30 people each session. Right now, we probably have, 10 to 15 people maybe. I haven't looked recently. And I think that's already a great number to have some great discussion. Frankly, the smaller the group, the richer the discussion. But we do have room if you want to join us for any of those sessions as well. And right now we don't have a reservation tool set up yet, so I'm just handling all of the registrations myself. So just email me, steve@recpokertraining.com, or reach out through social media, and I'll tell you how you can pay and lock in your seat. A new thing that we are just announcing here is November 29th. From 7 to 9 p.m., I don't care where you are, you can be local or not. We're going to do an online player panel Q&A. And for those of you who are part of the silver package or higher, I believe, this is included free of charge. You'll have to register, but it's still free. For others of you, I'm going to reduce this to $10. I think this is going to be a great value thing. For 2 hours, we're going to just ask questions of some very well-respected and accomplished recreational players. If you're local to Minnesota, you'll recognize these names. Otherwise, you'll just have to trust me that these are some very good minds. Matt Hamilton, Max Havlish, Ian Matakis, and Alan Carty, all of whom are just well-respected, very accomplished players that we can all learn a lot from. So I'll have details there. If you want to get on the interest list, just shoot me a note, and that way I can email you directly when the details are available. Happy to do that. Finally, well, maybe not finally. We've reached the end of October, which means I'm going to start putting together some reporting. So if you are at the $5 support level or higher, I will send this out to you by the middle of November. And this will include a ton of metrics. Since this is our first report, we'll actually go back historical to all that I have, but it'll include metrics on any of the data that's been submitted by you recreational players. And we'll look at things like ROI and the moneyness, caching factors, all of those sorts of things. And a reminder, every quarter, for those of you who are at the silver level or higher, I'll do quarterly analytics on your data as well as the combined data, and share all of that data for those of you who are supporting us at that level. And man, I think this is going to be incredibly helpful. It has been to me in the past, just looking at my own data, but when we start consolidating data, I think it's going to be super helpful. For those of you who don't know, I am an actuary by trade. I've done analytics, capital markets hedging, workforce analytics. This is what I do. I gain insights from data, and I think this is going to be something that's going to surprise you with how insightful it could be. So that's something you can take a look at as well. And finally, willing to do some email coaching. And we can do this at different support levels through Patreon, or we can do sort of a separate arrangement if you want. And again, I can offer you my insights, but I can also offer you insights that I'm gleaning from our content providers, and even on occasion be able to provide you links to some content that could help you work through some things on your own time. So that's a lot of information. Again, a lot of this you can get as part of your support on patreon.com. So I want to encourage you to go to patreon.com/RecPoker. We've got all of the different tiers listed out there: bronze, silver, gold, and platinum, where you can get this support. But also, feel free to just support without getting anything in return, even for $1 a month. All of these things add up. All of these things pave the way for us here at RecPoker to provide more things for you. The more we don't have to monetize things, the more we can just get support from all of you, the more we can just put content out for free. So obviously that's what I'm looking to do, is provide as much value as I can. But obviously it costs money to do these things, and so we're going to do it as cheap as we can, but the more support we get, the more we can put out there. So a ton of great options out there. Final reminders, thanks to the listeners, contributors, thanks to all of my friends, thanks to all of you who consider yourself part of RecPoker Nation. It's fun to see the momentum going. Thanks to Running Aces for your ongoing support, being our official sponsor. I want to please encourage you to like, comment, rate, review, subscribe, do all that stuff on iTunes that helps drive traffic toward us. Go to patreon.com/RecPoker to support it. If you want to wear a patch, let me know. If you want some merch, go to floptheworld.com/RecPoker. And as always, if you have any feedback, Facebook, Twitter, email me, whatever you want there. So that is it. Thanks for hanging with, and we will chat with you next week.